Right now on Tech Radio, where Australia goes, so goes the world.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
You're welcome to episode 1096. This week, the world watches as Australia bans social media for under 16s. The US considers a new social media rule for visitors, and remembering Ireland's first mobile phone call. Let's go.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me, as always, our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. Niall, I mean, the big tech story this week is Australia banning social media for under 16s. The question that everybody is asking is, will it work?
Will it work? Well, I think so. And the reason I think it will is because people realize that social media is bad for them, but they've been using it anyway. We know that social media, like, Instagram, like Facebook, these sites thrive on engagement, not being factual, not on protecting their users. Personally, I ditched most Meta products quite a while ago because it was serving me up stuff that I knew it was just designed to send me down a rabbit hole for hours on end, and it's happened to everyone.
Yeah.
So when you look at, teenagers, people in the formative years of their lives where, things that might, as an adult might annoy you at level 1 will, as a teenager, annoy you at level 10. Because that's just who you are when you're growing up. I think the prospect of having a break from that kind of toxicity, even if it feels like, oh God, the state is making me do it, I think it's actually going to work pretty well. And one of the reasons I think it will succeed is the comparative lack of pushback from parents groups, from the education sector. There is a legal action in place. I think it's 2 15-year-olds are putting something together. There's also been backlash from libertarian groups. Personally, I don't think you will ever meet a poor libertarian, so I'm not terribly worried about them. So will it work? I think so. At the moment, the rules are you can have an account from the age of 13 and up. These are self-imposed regulations by, Meta et al. 13 and up is the norm. By changing it to 16s, I think that's pretty reasonable. If you are, 16, if you're under 16 and you're logging into your, we'll say, YouTube account, you will have been met with a pop-up saying, hey, sorry, you're under 16. Here are your options. They're not great. As a one-time parent, Dusty, as a one-time and current parent.
As a one-time parent. Yeah, I did it. Didn't like it.
Yeah, it didn't take. It didn't take. What do you make of this? Like, you have the experience of actually dealing with a human that would look for ways to circumvent such systems.
Okay, well, the first thing is that if you want kids to not do something, the first thing you don't say is don't do that. Because as soon as you say don't do that, well, then kids will want to get on it. And I think it's funny is like, there is a pushback against Facebook and a lot of the other, and Instagram and a lot of the other social media things. Well, certainly amongst people that I would know, saying that they are taking it off their mobile phone because, as you just said, it's just full of rubbish. It's just, they want to engage you at all costs. All right. But I think now with Australia saying for the likes of Facebook and Instagram, okay, kids, you can't get on it, will make them want to get on it even more. And I also think that all they're doing is they're just going to find ways around that ban and they'll all be on it anyway. So I don't know is the answer to your question. I think it will absolutely have an effect because without any rules, then everybody will be on. At least as there's some rules, you might stop half of the people getting on.
Well, that's still a win as far
Well,
as
I think it is a bit. It's still a win, yeah. But that's Australia. I mean, Australia is very much a nanny state.
Oh,
So don't go into the water. Don't do this. Make sure you wear a helmet. That no, it drives me mad every time I'm there.
Australia is a country set up on the idea that everything is trying to kill you.
Well, that's what they say.
Because it is. It is hard country.
Yeah.
And, if they want to have, tough social media laws, I think they're an excellent country to do it in. They were, if memory serves, I mean, they were they've been very tough on Google when it comes to using news snippets. They are not afraid to stand up for their people and say, look, this isn't working. We left you to solve this problem.
Yeah.
You didn't. So we're going to take it off you. I mean, up here, we should be doing something similar, or rather, we should have been doing something similar. But, reasons, and when something actually does happen, you could imagine it will be a somewhat watered down version of what they're trying in Australia. But Godspeed. I hope it works out, because anything that helps people and their mental health is only a good thing.
Now, listen, speaking of mental health and getting around social media and all that kind of stuff, a lot of kids are actually turning to AI. And that is making the news this week as well.
It is, yeah. This is a survey out that was reported in The Guardian. 1 in 4 13 to 17-year-olds have used an AI chatbot for mental health support in the last year. This is pretty scary stuff.
Okay, can I just double check here that I'm thinking correctly? So kids are on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, whatever else, Threads, Snapchat, all of that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
And because it's so much and because it can be very poisonous, they are coming off of these social media and then they're talking to an AI for like counseling and help. And how do I deal with this?
I'm not even sure it requires that intermediate element. Like, I think people are going direct from, the harshness of real life directly to AI buddies. I think,
wow,
the existence of social media, it's almost, sure, it might have opened the door to make people comfortable in opening up about themselves on other media, but it looks like people aren't using, there isn't a hierarchy here. There isn't a, I have a problem in real life, I have a problem online, and then I talk to my AI. I think it's just kids are using it as a tool of choice instead of relying on a social network, instead of relying on their friends, instead of relying on mentors or parents or people in that kind of function that would ordinarily take up that role. So I think that's particularly scary because you have people in distress using a service that is designed to make you want to keep using it. Not for, accuracy, but again, it's for your attention. You remember
with AI.
With AI. You remember what happened when they changed ChatGPT's voice from, friendly, happy, clappy to something a bit more formal. People went nuts and they had to rein it back in. They had to change the voice again. So I think this is a distressing development. I think we really need to have an important discussion about the role of mentors in society. If you can't, if you feel you can't talk to your friends, if you feel you can't talk to your parents, there are services there to help you. You don't need to go to technology for that kind of help and support. I don't know, Dusty, what do you think?
I just think it's scary because now I'm a little older, a little bit more experienced, so it just makes me smile every time I put a query into Gemini, and the first part of the response is, "That's a great question. Oh, you're so clever. What an insightful thought." All this kind of rubbish. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just feeds narcissism like you wouldn't believe. For a teenager who's still kind of getting a handle on how to work this planet, to be fed that kind of stuff is it's not good. Yeah, they do need real people. I can understand though why they are going to an AI, because when you're a teenager, and I was about to say I remember it well. I don't remember it well, but I certainly wouldn't want to relive it. But when you're a teenager, everything seems huge. Do you know what I mean? When you're an adult and you're older, more experienced, it's kind of like, all right, it's a problem, but everything is huge when you're a teenager. And going to an AI, it's like, oh, crikey. Now, that's even more worrying than Australia banning teens from being on social media. It's madness. Moving along, though, speaking of social media, another story which I think is quite interesting, with the United States of America putting a proposal out there that they want to see your social media as part of your electronic visa.
Yeah, start scrubbing those accounts. This is the latest thing from the Trump administration, who are, we've been tracking the adoption of this America First isolationist approach to the world, this sort of adversarial strategy they seem to be adopting with everyone. And the latest of it is to add your social media history to your ESTA visa. Now, not the last 12 months or anything sort of, related to the news, but the last 5 years. 5 years, Dusty. Do you know what this actually encompasses? Which I think is fascinating, and it's just occurred to me now.
The last 5 years, so basically you've got to give them your social media, whatever it is you use. Here's my Twitter handle, here's my Facebook account address, here's my LinkedIn, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And they can look back for all time if they so wish.
Well, no, they've got a 5-year window. It's not going to happen in Europe anyway, but the EU won't let them. But here you go. What happened in 2020?
COVID.
What else happened just before it?
I don't know. I give up.
It's the J6 riots. The January 6th riots on the Capitol.
Ah, yes. Mr. Trump saying we're going to march up to the Capitol and da-da-da-da. Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's why the 5 years, is it?
I think if you were working the gate and you wanted to see somebody's social media history and looking for red flags, you would go to January 6th, 2020, and you would see, are they adhering to the official government narrative? Or are they being critical of the now current, again, US president? That's the hot spot right there.
Interesting. All right. I hadn't looked at it from that, but I think by the time this gets through legislation and so on, we'll be past the 5 years from 2020 at that stage for that particular date. But that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought of that. But listen, I believe social media is not the only thing that they are looking for you to provide.
No. And this is, I mean, as if this wasn't bad enough as it is. I mean, they're going to look for, okay, who else is in your family? Give us some biometric information. Who have you been emailing? Who have you been talking to? This is an absurd level of detail. And I think this is what makes me think more and more that this is just saber rattling from the Trump administration.
I think it is, yeah.
So, sort of, this whole free movement of labor kind of a thing. Well, we don't need it. We don't need your talented people from overseas. We don't need your money. We don't need your tourism. So I think you'll find We're all connected.
Well, I'll
bro.
tell you, if they want to know my social media stuff, and I don't really use social media anyway, so it doesn't matter. But just on the point of principle, if they want my social media going back the last 5 years, the answer is no. If they want to know all of the phone numbers I've had in the last 5 years, the answer is no, because I don't even remember them. Whoever uses phone numbers, you write them down somewhere and then you forget about it. Yeah. Email addresses that I've had over the last decade, forget it. Personal details of family members and biometric information. No, I ain't going to America. End of. I don't care what the hell is going on there.
Yeah, they've got some stuff going on at the moment, and you know what?
That's it. But listen, as you say, the EU would never allow it, so we'll just let that dry. It probably will be the usual thing that we've seen going on in the last year, where they come out with outrageous ideas or demands or whatever, and then row way back on them. But anyways,
that is the style.
Yeah, exactly. Also this week in the news, we had a recent visit from President Zelensky from Ukraine, but there's a wee bit of a disgraceful side to Irish behaviour, if you like, because there was some alleged drone activity.
Okay, right. This is kind of a difficult story to frame. The arrival of President Zelensky had been flagged for quite a while. This was a big deal. This was a great opportunity for the government to, provide, another show of public support for Ukraine, the Ukrainian people. We also donated 125 million euro to Ukraine. All very good things. However, just before President Zelensky's plane landed, 2 drones were identified off the coast of Dublin. And as we're talking now, there are still a few questions as to where they came from. Were they launched from land or at sea? Were they consumer grade or were they military grade? I've seen reports of both. And personally, I think this is another example of disruption, I'll call it that we have seen across Europe this summer and in the latter half of this year, particularly at airports. If you're looking at what happened in Belgium, these drones appear and they disappear. We had an incident at Dublin Airport earlier this year as well, didn't we? There was a sighting that shut everything down for a few hours. And here we have 2 drones of unknown capability. Apparently they'd been cleared off by the time President Zelensky arrived, but we don't know if that's because they ran out of battery or because it was mission accomplished or what have you, All I know is that both the Defence Forces and An Garda Síochána have been pointing fingers at each other as to who was responsible for allowing these drones to stay within an ass's roar of the flight plan of President Zelensky's plane. I saw one comment from the Gardaí saying, wondering why a warning shot wasn't fired. The Minister for Justice, Jim Callaghan, came out and was very he was praising the Gardaí's technical capabilities in terms of signal jamming and this kind of thing. In another report I saw, it turns out we are lacking the appropriate capability with our army to disrupt drone activity. So it just brings us to today, where the government announced a pot of $1.7 billion in fresh defence spending to take us up to 2030. Amongst that is significant anti-drone measures, which I'm sure is all just a coincidence. Personally, I think it is tremendously embarrassing for something like this to be let happen. And it speaks to the wider perspective of Ireland as once again being a freeloader. It's like, okay, we freeload in corporate taxes off a very small amount of US companies that we attracted here through very, very favourable rates. And, our physical protection is managed by the UK and the US, who hopefully will never be in a bad mood with us. And that's, this is just more of it. So it's a bit of a kick in the teeth, bit of a slap in the face to get us to actually individual up and start investing in our defense forces properly, and realize that, there are scenarios being played out where, our supply lines are not, they're not rigid. If something happens to England, it's going to happen 10 times over here. If America decides NATO isn't such a fantastic idea anymore, all of a sudden we've gone from being an island nation snuggled between two nuclear powers to being on the edge of nowhere. I don't know, Dusty, you look unconvinced.
I'm just watching the world as it goes, and I see what's happening in America is the fall of an empire, and I see the whole new world order is changing, and the rise of China and Asia, and a very heavy emphasis being put on Europe to look after themselves. And part of that then is, kind of at Ireland, well, listen, come here. Europe are doing the same thing to us. Being neutral is all fine and good, but at the same time, are you going to pick a side or not?
Well, here's the thing, right? I can't remember where I got this quote from, but it's about the idea of friendship, and it's. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you find out who your friends are if they decide to take a bullet for you.
Oh, man. If they decide to take a bullet for you, now that's quite extreme.
That would be, that's a good test of our friendship, because at the moment, Ukraine is being pretty friendly to all of Europe. By that metric. So I know. I think the world is being divvied up into a series of crime families at the moment. But
listen, we are veering towards political, and we're not a political podcast. Let's get back to some tech stories this week. The EU has opened an investigation into Google, but this time over content moderation.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that we really do want to see the EU get up in big tech's faces about, content moderation. This is an investigation that's only being started, so it's kind of new territory. So let's see where this actually goes. X was hit with a fine for 120 million euro last week. And the funny thing is that Musk was straight up all on X going, oh, freedom of speech, this is censorship, but disband the EU, it's terrible, Europe hasn't been good since blah 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 blah, witter, whatever he says. The funny thing is that X was not sanctioned over its attitude towards content moderation or anything to do with free speech. That's a separate investigation. X was sanctioned over not allowing other people access to their platform so they could develop compatible applications, because that's part of the Digital Markets Act, is opening up the big platforms so other people can work with them. It's an interoperability issue. That's why X were fined for this particular investigation. Nothing to do with freedom of speech. Of course, his army of Simpson bots were out saying yes and posting memes and all this kind of thing. However, my favorite counter meme was it's two black figures, two silhouettes. On the left, there's a small person with a red MAGA hat saying, "I don't live in the EU, but I think." And the second silhouette is a person walking in the other direction. And the speech bubble is, "You don't live here, don't care."
Interesting, though, it is not about freedom of speech. It's about the platform access. And that kind of ties into another story where Bluebird, which of course wants to be the next Twitter, is actually taking some legal steps to try and get it towards that.
Well, this is Operation Bluebird. It sounds much more impressive when you put it that way. A startup that they want to rescue the words Twitter and tweets from X. And the reason that they say they can do it is that the effectively, by not using either term, X has abandoned them in a commercial sense. So somebody should be able to re-trademark them in their own image, if you will. So if successful, pretty soon we could see a website called twitter.new. And, good luck to them.
Good luck. I don't think it's a great idea.
That said, I mean, why don't you think it's a great idea?
Because I think the Twitter brand has been forever damaged. So even if you do come back with a whole new Twitter, people are just, because people don't pay attention. And they just go, I'm not going near that. That's Elon Musk. That's X.
Well, I would say the brand is in storage. It's there for
I think it's been damaged.
resurrect.
Yeah. Put in storage because it's damaged. How's that? Will we agree to that?
Okay. Okay. They're in cryogenic storage because they have some sort of disease that can't be cured in our lifetime.
There you go. They got the super flu that's going around. All right. Listen, last story for this week, and it's an anniversary story. It was this very week, 40 years ago, that none other than Pat Kenny made history. What did he do?
He received the very first call in Ireland on a mobile phone.
First mobile phone call.
Isn't that something?
That's well, it's kind of bananas because I believe the first mobile phone call was made in New York in the early 70s.
Wow.
If I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
It was certainly sometime in the 70s, and it was certainly I'll look it up now while we're chatting. But so it would have taken, like when you think about how fast things move today, back then it took like 15 years for mobile phones to take place. When was the first mobile phone call made? Okay, you can probably hear me typing there on the keyboard, but anyway, it's no bother. Let's see what Perplexity has to say about this. 3rd of April, 1973 was placed in New York City by Motorola engineer Martin Cooper using a prototype handheld phone. Yes, I remember hearing about that and reading the story and watching a TV show. So I do believe that as fact. 3rd of April, 1973 was the world's first mobile phone call. And then it took 12 years for that to happen in Ireland. I remember the first mobile phones.
I think we've gotten better at catching up since then.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, you know, how fast things move these days. I first remember mobile phones in 1980. What? It must have been 1986. Because I remember two guys, I was running around as a baby DJ at the time doing a 21st and all kinds of parties and whatever. And the guys that I rented the gear off had mobile phones in their van. And it was just the thing. And I remember like kind of calling my girlfriend at the time, going, hey, guess where I am? I'm driving down the Howth Road. What a complete waste of what I'm sure was a very expensive call. Do you remember when you got your first mobile phone?
I do. I think it was either 96 or 97.
Yeah.
And it was a Motorola A130, which you might remember as the ready-to-go phone. But I didn't get it in the year that the ready-to-go phone was released.
Yeah.
So I think I got it the year before it came out because the version, the credit version was slightly different.
Gotcha.
And the only people I knew, I think I knew maybe two other people who had mobile phones, and the rest were drug dealers.
Niall, you're a dark horse at the best of times. Listen, let's leave it up there for now for the news. Thanks for keeping us up to speed. Large language models are the public face of AI, but few people realise that the technology has been with us in some shape or form for decades. During the week, Niall Kitson had a very interesting chat about the journey of AI from Clippy in Microsoft Word to ChatGPT with Brian Mac Namee, An excellent person to talk about it, as he's Associate Professor in the School of Computer Science at UCD, Co-Director of the Insight Research Ireland Centre for Data Analytics and Co-Director of the Research Ireland Centre for Research Training in Machine Learning. Here's the conversation.
Brian, over the last few years, the conversation in AI and all things AI has been ChatGPT, it's been Gemini, it's been Copilot, it's been why Apple Intelligence doesn't work. It's been all these things. Just down the street from me, there's a billboard ad for ChatGPT, as if one were ever needed. It begs the question, is this sort of an overnight success that large language models have kind of dropped in our laps and we're still figuring out what to do with them? Or is it the progress of years of incremental research, some might say, going all the way back to Clippy up to ChatGPT now? Is this kind of evolution we're seeing?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And I think it is a little of both. So I think one thing that's really important is the foundations of AI, as we think about it now, is all based in machine learning. And people have been working on machine learning methods for decades now. And there's been a steady progression in capability. And that's mixed up with developments of machine learning techniques and algorithms. In parallel,
Trinity
advances
College
in computation, and in parallel again with that again,
project.
Advances in the amount of
Google
data that we have available, because machine learning is fundamentally a data processing machine. I think when people talked about AI at that time, it was more of a broader ambition, that we could build computer systems that were a bit more broadly capable. And while in my opinion, we aren't at a place yet where we could talk about what people refer to as artificial general intelligence, which is the notion of building an AI system that's kind of good at lots of different things in the way that we are. We're definitely in a place now where we can build AI systems that are still machine learning models, and it's machine learning that powers all these things, but we can build them that are certainly much more broadly applicable than they used to be. And especially the modern iteration of large language models that we use that tend to be multimodal in that they can generate and understand text, but also images. And most recently, we've seen lots of interesting work with video, that we're seeing that, I suppose, landscape of what we can do with those things become much, much broader than the maybe very controlled, very niche applications that we used to work on 20 odd years ago.
And with those niche applications, I mean, it sounds like the principles really haven't changed very much in all that time. I mean, you still require a set of training data before you can start designing your algorithm to give you a particular output. So, in a sense, looking at the great reveal of large language models, whether it be whatever OpenAI is doing, all the way up to what DeepSeek is doing, it has the fact that we have training data and we have algorithms, it's not kind of news to you really in a way, is it?
A little bit. And I suppose I spend a lot of my time out in various jobs sort of talking to people about AI and giving training courses around AI and machine learning. And a certain amount of that is myth busting and trying to wipe to one side a lot of the hype that builds up. I know of a nice picture of a scene from The Wizard of Oz where they pull back the curtain and see the little old man sitting in beside the machine that I use in that, because you're absolutely right that the fundamental techniques that we use are somewhat unchanged for quite a while now. It is big data sets, the same kind of training algorithms applied to those data sets. Now, a few really interesting things have happened. So one is there are some interesting algorithmic novel developments. So people have come up with clever things like the transformer model and like convolutional neural networks that work especially well with images. The scale of both data and computation that we can work with now is way beyond what we've had before, and that opens up new possibilities. And there is a slight sort of nuance in the idea that some people use the phrase foundation models to refer to, that if you do train one of these large models, particularly the large language models, the learning that they do and the sort of patterns that they encapsulate and capabilities that they encapsulate become then a foundation that you can build other applications around and on top of. And what that means is you can get much further faster. So whereas before, if we wanted to build something, we would start from scratch and we would need totally fresh new set of data to build things on top of. Now we do have this capability to transfer some of the capability from a foundation model to a new application and do what some people refer to as fine tuning on top of that. And that just means you can do much more, much faster than we could before, because you're not starting from a blank slate. You're starting from a set of capability and then either building on top of or fine tuning that for your application. And that definitely opens up lots of application domains that wouldn't have the volume of data to allow those previous approaches of starting from scratch to work. But now we can work by taking this foundation model approach. And that's been one of the really interesting developments that we've had in the last few years.
Which is how you get people doing things like, scraping Wikipedia or scraping Reddit or something like that, just to get some class of data to work with. Well, without necessarily, although there is absolutely a market for companies developing their own LLMs based on domain-specific information. Is that part of the discussion that you've seen happening, where companies are thinking, well, we have our data. What happens if we want to turn it into or let AI loose on it? Does this mean that we lose control of it, or is it something that we will have much more control over the security of it?
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot of really interesting conversations around how to approach that foundation model idea. So while they do give great capability, two issues that spring immediately to mind with sort of building in that fashion is, one, a reliance on top of whoever provides this model. And typically that's a handful of very large organizations who have the capability to train those large language models from scratch. And then, understandably, a lot of questions on the provenance of the data that's been used to train those. And the courts are full of court cases now arguing about where the data used to train those models came from, and if the people training those models had the rights and permission to use that data. And in lots of cases, there have been some recent judgments that they didn't have the rights and permissions to use that data. So that opens up the prospect of approaching this in other ways. One of those is, could we build independent models? So if people do have access to sufficient computation, access to sufficient data, that opens up an opportunity. And there's some really interesting research going on about how we can be more, I would say, thoughtful in the way that we train those models to make that training process more efficient, both in the level of computation required and therefore the energy requirements of that, and also the kind of data that we would use to do it. The dominant approach now is the more is better. Just hoover up as much data as you possibly can and shove it all into the training process. Whereas the sort of frontier in research looks towards how we could use much more carefully curated data sets that were therefore cleaner, free from lots of the unpleasantness that might be in the data sets that you just hoover up from the internet, and would have much more, authentic provenance than the data sets that are used at the moment, and how we could train models on top of that. I think another really interesting question is the whole idea of sort of sovereign models and who owns these models. So again, it's a handful of large corporations typically who are training and releasing these frontier foundation models at the moment. There's a good argument to say that we should have other groups who are doing that. There's a question of things like, should we have an Irish large language model? I'm not sure if we certainly at the moment don't have the resources to do that, but having European foundation frontier models is definitely a very realistic thing, and there's some realistic efforts in that regard. I think one other thing that's interesting is ensuring that we have people who have the capability to do these kind of things, and that's one of the things that we're looking at in UCD with some new infrastructure that we have at the moment, where we will have the capability to give students an experience where they can train not frontier models at the very frontier in terms of scale, but models that are interesting and sort of in that region. And I think it's really important that we would have people in Ireland who have the capability and experience of doing that kind of thing. And that's something that's open to us now.
looking at sort of those barriers to innovation that repeatedly come up, in Ireland we've got a very difficult relationship with data centres at the moment, largely because our electricity grid was not built with a view to anything requiring as much resources from the grid, and it's an international problem. It just, given the companies that are located here, it seems to be an almost uniquely Irish problem. We're seeing in the States, we've got, $500 billion under the Stargate plan just to build data centres and infrastructure. Of course, in Ireland, we've got our issues with data centres in principle, but we also have issues of compute and hardware as well. So what developments are happening in UCD to help deal with that?
Yeah, so I think all of those points you make are really interesting, and both from the national perspective, there's a lot of work to do and interesting decisions to be made. And then at the local perspective in UCD, we've been able to ramp up basically the capability that we have in terms of infrastructure recently. So we've had, I suppose, 4 big things that have happened in the last year. So one is that we've had a reinvestment by the university of about €1.5 million into our Sonic platform, which is the university-wide platform for high-performance computing, to bring that basically to advance the capabilities of what we can do with that. Secondly, we've had the funding of a new supercomputer named Aura, specifically targeted at AI workflows. So equipped with graphical processor units, or GPUs, which are the power horses, or the workhorses that we need for doing AI work. We've also had the Leon computer that is part of the Cedar Center here in UCD, and that's been upgraded. And last but not least, we've had a recent new center established, funded by Met Éireann, called Aimsir, and there's a computing platform as part of that as well. And what that means is, with those 4 pieces combined, researchers and students in UCD now have access to a level of computing infrastructure that we've never had before, and I think is probably at the very edge of what any of the universities in the country have. And that allows, like I say, both researchers and students at UCD, and in particular in the Insight Centre for Research that I'm one of the co-directors of, access to resources that we couldn't have before, which then opens up a landscape of research opportunities that we basically couldn't pursue without this kind of computation. Now, at the same time, the kind of numbers that we talk about are dwarfed by some of the international investments in infrastructure that are going on in the US, but across Europe as well. That will, as time goes by, lead to us being at somewhat of a competitive disadvantage in terms of what we're able to do here in Ireland as we go out into the world and try to, I guess, compete for research infrastructure, compete for those companies to base themselves here. So it's something that we need basically continuous effort on, continuous update on, because it is something that is a competitive factor, and is something that both in universities, both students and staff, will ask if they're talking about coming to a university focused on AI. They'll ask about the infrastructure that's going to be available to them and whether or not it's competitive. And then similarly, on a broader national scale, as industry looks to where it might base itself, access to computing capabilities is a competitive factor. And it's something that I think, from an Irish perspective, we need to make sure that we're staying on top of, and maybe taking a leadership role in providing computing power in a sustainable way that would sort of blend, I guess, to particular selling points of Ireland.
And a big part of that competitive advantage will come in the form of the ideas people are putting forward on which projects to pursue. Of course, we have a lot of people coming through the sciences. We have a lot of graduates. We have a lot of people with big ideas, but maybe not the expertise or the ability to even start a conversation with somebody working in AI that could help forward an idea and perhaps turn it into a profitable company. company, a spin out, or make it their life's work, if you will, particularly when we're looking at things like drug discovery. So when it comes to facilitating those conversations with people with, say, a general science background, what is the process? Do people come to the centres and say, look, I have an idea, it might require massive compute power, or is this something that you guys are interested in, that you've done before? How do the lines of communication work?
That's a great question, and I think is one of the things that recent developments in AI has really unlocked is the ability to work on AI projects in a multidisciplinary way. So the emergence of these foundation models means that it is easier to bring AI capability into new and interesting domains. And one of the things that we work to facilitate, if we take the Insight Center as a good example, is to facilitate that interdisciplinary work. So putting together AI researchers with researchers from other domains and kicking off that conversation, because it's really important that the conversation is equally balanced in both directions. There's a really bad outcome that we jokingly refer to as turning up with a laptop in the wrong shoes, where AI researchers just steam into a new domain and basically say, get out of my way, I'll solve all the problems here because I've got this phenomenal AI tool, and if you just leave me alone, I'll be able to do everything. And that leads to basically useless outcomes, because the really interesting opportunities come from in-depth domain knowledge coupled together with in-depth knowledge of what AI is capable of and where the real opportunities exist. And we spend a lot of time essentially building AI literacy amongst people in other domains with domain literacy amongst our AI researchers and facilitating those multidisciplinary conversations. We do that in the Insight Center, and we've had some really good successes, for example, in the whole area of applying AI to cultural studies, so history, English, and so on, where through in-depth collaborations, we've been able to build really effective AI-based tools that people in other domains use and that are sensitive and sympathetic to the needs of those domains and the actual questions that people in those domains are trying to ask. And we've had some really nice outcomes. My colleagues here in UCD, Derek Green and Geraldine Meany, have been leading an awful lot of that work, and they've done phenomenal things together. Similarly, in UCD, in the AI Healthcare Hub, we're doing a similar job. So again, my colleague Patricia Maguire leads that, and the whole purpose of the Healthcare Hub is to do exactly what you suggest there, where we bring clinicians from a health background together with AI researchers and make that path to developing novel AI solutions for clinical applications as smooth and obstacle-free as we possibly can. And again, that all comes from these interdisciplinary conversations where we're advancing AI literacy in other domains, but putting the people in those domains in the driving seat of what we're going to do using AI tools. I also work personally with a company called Chrysalis, delivering AI literacy masterclasses and workshops across industry and the public sector to do exactly the same thing. And what we're really focused on there all the time is to empower people in other domains with enough AI knowledge to recognize the opportunities, because it typically is deep in the weeds of what they do where the really valuable opportunities for applying AI are. And let's say the AI scientists coming from outside the domains are never going to spot those things. So it's only when you, again, get that, combination of perspectives together that we see the really, really exciting opportunities.
And that was Niall Kitson chatting with Brian Mac Namee.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some of the other stories we have online for you, including...
Yeah, Trinity College has just joined an international networking project. Google has set out a 2027 deadline to get a data center in space. And Trump says okay to NVIDIA selling its chips in China.
We're back again next Friday with a brand new show online and, of course, with RTE Radio 1 Extra. In the meantime, please do share our podcast with a friend. Just tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever they get their podcasts. Until next time, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall Kitson, as always, thank you for listening. Have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.